Hi, hello, my name's Ollie Bliss and this is my channel Bookdraw. For those who don't know, I enjoy looking at queer fiction and occasionally I enjoy creating images out of it. Today I'm looking back at 2018, so I'm giving you all my favourite reads from 2018. These are not necessarily books which have been published in 2018, these are just the reads which I have really enjoyed myself during 2018. So in at number 8 is The Less Than Epic Adventures of TJ and Amal, which is a webcomic which you can actually view freely online. Now, I haven't actually talked about this one on my channel before previously. I didn't realise this, but when it was the Queer Lit Readathon back in, I think it was like June, ChrisViglante responded with a recommendation of different webcomics. And that night I ended up reading this webcomic because I was just quite curious and I liked the look of the style of the drawing which had been done. And I must have read it in about 2-3 hours maximum. Like, it was really quick, but because I mean webcomics in general, that you can motor through them, can't you? But I just love the story, and so a big thank you and shout out to ChrisViglante for doing that. I'll add a link down below so you can see his full video, because he recommends I think like 5 different webcomics, which are really cool. So basically, the story starts off with Amal, who was supposed to have an arranged marriage and ends up deciding at that moment to come out that he's gay to his family. He then progressively gets really drunk and wakes up the next day next to TJ. Somehow through the course of that evening they had arranged to do a nice long drive and agree to go on this road trip together, and it's over the course of the day that they get to know each other on a completely different level. And it's this part of the story which I really enjoyed. Something about it just felt like a really sunny, hazy day which kind of goes by in an instant but has some sort of resounding impact on you on a personal level, where you feel like you've been on this just sublime journey with another being. The next one which I want to champion is North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell, and I want to say a big thank you to Katie, who ran VIctober with a bunch of other people, but it was through her that I ended up joining in on VIctober, and she's from Books and Things. I'll add a link down below again so you can check out her videos. But it was through her that I ended up reading North and South. I ended up going and visiting Elizabeth Gaskell's house, and I've got a video down for that. But I also did North and South as a buddy read with Milena, who I also had links down to her channel as well. She's a little less regular than other booktubers, but her content's really cool and she is just a wonderful person, and we had great discussions about North and South. And we quickly discovered that the book wasn't about a romance as other kind of English period historic novels can be. This was about class, this was about working conditions, this was about the division between North and South, this is about those who own industry and the workers within those places, and it really set out a context of the time, and you get a sense and a flavour of that period in a really detailed, rich way. Just also the way in which that you go along that journey and you root for Margaret and you want her to do well, and she overcomes some serious obstacles in her time, and it's just handled in a brilliant way. The next one which I want to talk about is Margot and Me, which is by Juno Dawson. Now, I just love this book. This book was so nice. You've got Fliss, who is a young girl, I think she's about 18, and she ends up going over to Wales to visit her grandmother. She's looking after her and her mother, who's recuperating from chemotherapy. Now Fliss, she's a bit of a brat at the start of the book, and she hasn't got a great relationship with her grandmother Margot, and it's about that friction. Her grandmother comes across quite hard, quite stoic, but she ends up rooting around in the attic and she uncovers Margot's diary, and this is where the story really kicks off. You start delving into her history. It's the 1940s, and you unravel her history and her secrets, and it really brings her in a human light. Next one, number 5, is The Heart's Invisible Furies. I really enjoyed this read. It's a much longer burn in terms of its scale. You go from the 1940s, and you're living the life of Cyril Avery, who's not a real Avery, who's an adopted son, and you experience his life in Ireland and how he makes his escape, and he moves on over into Amsterdam and into New York and returns back, and it's that whole lifetime experience that he has, that you are on his journey with him. What I really appreciated about this book is just the scale of time that you flow through, and you see how his character and his inner psyche changes and evolves, and how his attitude changes, and how people's attitudes around him changes as well. But what I also enjoyed was the way in which the story introduces other broader moments in history, such as the AIDS epidemic, and how that impacts on the people that he knows. I also like the way in which they twisted that side of the story, because usually you have the perspective of a homosexual man who develops AIDS, or a loved one of one of his gay mates develops AIDS and dies. This story doesn't quite do that. It actually twists it up quite in a different way, and you see a different lens and a different side to it, which I actually really appreciate and thought was handled in a really excellent way, and it just added an extra addition to why the story was so good. I also like the way that it actually depicts the hypocrisy of religion and the small town village mentality that you can experience, but also I like the way in which that he put upon himself positions which he didn't necessarily have to, and actually acted as a bit of a coward and a bit of a dick, really. He hurts people around him, and some of those flawed elements really add value to the whole book and the experience of the book, and just made me appreciate what the writer had actually achieved overall. It was just a really, really good piece of writing. The next one, which I really enjoyed and want to shout about, is The Power by Naomi Alderman. So I again did this with a buddy read with Amelia, and so she doesn't actually have a channel, but I think a lot of people who do have channels will know her. She comments a lot on, she's really active in the booktube community in that sense, and we had a really great time reading through this book together. So The Power is set in a kind of, it's dystopian, right, in the setup, in an alternative future, I should say, where women gain the ability to conduct electricity from their fingers. Certain women develop this ability, and it creates a change in gender power and politics because of that, and that is the focus of the story. It made me really question my values and the way that I treat women, or I just look at society or act in society, and it made me really question how I have framed women in my mind, and how privileged I am as a man, and just hadn't recognised where our society is tripping up women constantly, and this book really flips that on its head, and I think that's been uncomfortable for some men to read, and I think that's really valuable that it does. The next one, number 3, I want to talk about is the Hyperion Cantos, which is actually 4 different books, but really you can treat them as 2. So you have Hyperion to start with, and then you have the Fall of Hyperion, which then leads on to like a future separate time with Endymion and the rise of Endymion. But they all form a part of the series, the Hyperion Cantos, which is a series which I've read in 2018. It's an incredible sci-fi written by Dan Simmons, and I just absolutely adored the process and the journey of this epic tale. In the first book, through that entire process, you only begin to identify and find out why each of them are on this pilgrimage. You don't even get to where they go to on their pilgrimage by the end of that first book. But in the second part of it, that's where the action all really kicks off, and you understand how they've all come together and what their different roles are within that world and why they are there. But what's even more amazing and wondrous about the whole scale of the book is that world just expands and continues. The universe just opens up further and further through time and space when you get into Endymion and the rise of Endymion, and it's just the scale of the concept of the story which I really, really adored, and it kind of touched me on a spiritual level, because the things that it's talking about is what like humanity's all about, why we exist, and what we're all leading towards, and how we're growing as individuals. And it just gave me hope. It gave me hope, and it made me feel like I'm living and contributing to a nice flow of stuff that you might not necessarily be able to understand, but the process is very edifying and wondrous. Then in at number 2, I want to talk about Juliet Takes a Breath, which is by Gabby Rivera, and I just absolutely adore this story. This story really touched me, I think, because I shared something in terms of the experience of Juliet, who she's a young woman who's 18, a Puerto Rican woman who's goes on an internship over in Oregon, and she's meeting and working with an author who she idolizes. And it's through that process that she really begins to experience the world in a different way. And I share that understanding, being someone who went to university but then took time out to go over to Amsterdam for 6 months. And that period of time really changed and shaped me, because I was introduced to lots of different people who thought and viewed the world in a very different way to my own, and it really expanded and informed my values and the way I think. And you can see that process happening to Juliet. She's taken out of her comfort zone, she's introduced to people who are very different to herself, but they align to some of her values, and that is something that she wasn't maybe necessarily really actively seeking, but she nudged herself in that direction. And it's the snowball effect of just pursuing that type of activity or meeting those type of people that really opens up new doors for her. And you can see a whole new way of looking at the world, and looking at her gender, looking at her sexuality, and just seeing that flourishing and developing is just a wonderful thing to be a part of. And what I loved about the way in which the writing is done is that it takes you with you on that journey. You go along with her, and it doesn't force you to make any decisions about what you should be thinking or feeling, but it just introduces concepts to you in a very nuanced and subtle way. And then finally, let's talk about love. In at number 1 for my reads of the year, this is by Claire Can, and this is one of the books which I actually read right at the beginning of the year. So this isn't to say that I had a poor reading year at all. I felt like I've read some great books. It's just that this found a really special place in my heart, and I can't really pinpoint exactly why. I think part of the reason is that this is a YA novel. So this is about Alice, who is asexual, and you meet her where she's moving on from a previous dodgy relationship, and she experiences this real deep infatuation for this new member of staff who's working in a library with her. And I mean, set in a library, so that's got to have some appeal. So she meets Cami, and she forms this real desire towards this guy, and you see their friendship really flourishing, but then she has to overcome the fact that she wants to communicate to him that she is asexual, and she wants to form this relationship on her own terms, and how there is a bit of tension within that, and how they're navigating that space. But it's handled in such a really mature and frank and open way, and you can see that she has this real strong core character that where she does ultimately know herself, but she is still going through that process of learning what her sexuality and identity is really all about. But what this gave me insight to is the difference between attraction and arousal, which I had never really separated in my mind before, and the way in which it explains that process and that difference and what that means to her, and really struck a chord with me in terms of I do have a spectrum of arousal and desire across men and different types of men, and it's very applicable in terms of any person, in terms of how we do have different forms of attraction for people. But it's hard, it's just a great story. It's just a really nice romantic story, which feels very innocent. It's not naive though. It feels like it's really mature actually in a lot of ways, and it just takes you on a wonderful, pleasurable romance, which is just, it's not sickly sweet, it's honest and it's open and it feels right, it feels really good actually. And I felt like it has stayed with me, and it's been in the back of my mind, and it's something that I bring back up in conversation with people and it's something that I've referred to across the year. So for me, that is like a really good sign of a really good book and a really good story, and that's why this one is my 2018 top #1 book. So anyway, those are my top 8 for 2018. I don't really know why there's only 8 of them, there just is. I mean, there were other really good books in that course of that time, but for me, for different reasons, these are the ones that have really stood out for me. If you've done a top 2018 video, please let me know by adding it down below. I'd be really interested in watching your video and finding out your top books for 2018. I love these videos. I found them so rewarding to watch, and I think it's a great place to share them with everybody else, so please share. And if you're also someone who's not a creator but has had a lot of fun reads over 2018, please let me know as well, because I'd just be curious to hear from you which your favourites have been as well. Anyway, this is enough from me. I will see you again all real soon. Okay, take care. Bye.